if they hadn't been adopted, well, that's really outside their
imagination.
their ability to think things through.
That's quite strange, because as a human being, mature person can imagine like that. If even ordinary people, they think about, if I choose that way, then my life would have been that way, like that. So we always thinking back in order to make a better decision in the future.
Yes, I'm not sure that young people who grew up in the early 2000s, most did not have terribly good reflective skills. And they tended to live in the now and in the future. They tended to accept everything that was given to them and consider themselves as entitled to that. Although our children, seeing we were average to below average in what we could offer them, our children certainly didn't get the material benefits that some of the other children they knew did. Because of my role, I was able to get a very substantial discount at a very good school that normally parents would have had to pay 5 times more for, and that meant our children enjoyed that school, but many of the young people they were mixing with were from extremely wealthy backgrounds, and so they saw themselves as reasonably hard done by.
Are they thankful to you for being their parents?
I think they are to some extent.
They don't say it very often.
But they don't say it very often, and in general we just are their parents, so they take it for granted.
When we first met Koreans and Korean children, people who spoke Korean, we took a while to realise that it's the language that creates the honorific and the levels of language that creates the honour to parents and how children should behave in front of their parents and their grandparents. Sarah and Tim didn't have that. It just didn't exist. So that being thankful and honouring us, it didn't come naturally. Maybe if we'd had our parents around us, because we lived a long way from both of our parents, maybe if we'd spent more time with extended family, they might have seen how we behaved with our parents, but they didn't see that, did they?
Not very much.
While they visited you, how did you communicate with them? The cousins speak English?
With Sarah's mother, Sarah's biological mother. Well, it was a very odd situation, actually. I sent her a whole CD and pictures of Sarah's life to Eastern Child Welfare and asked them if they could locate Sarah's mother. And earlier on, when we adopted them, they said there was no way, there was probably not much likelihood that we could ever find her parents or her mother. But that actually wasn't quite right, because they had her social security number. As soon as they got my letter, they found out that she was living out of Busan, and they sent the parcel to the police station in Busan, and she was called and went and picked it up. So it only took 2 weeks for us to know that she was there. And then I had written a letter in English, and my Korean friend had translated it for me. So she had the letter in 2 languages, and she knew, you know, everything. And but the amazing thing was, she was the middle of 5 children, and none of her siblings knew that Sarah existed. So she told her sister, but her sister had a daughter who was on a working holiday in Bunbury.
Which is where I grew up and where my parents were still living at that time.
So we met, had lunch together, and they came over for pizza at night. We had a lovely time. She was absolutely gorgeous, really lovely girl. I invited her mum to come visit us, and she said she would come, but the auntie wanted to come too, or her sister wanted to come too, and then they brought Jihae over from Melbourne, from Perth. So they all landed in Victoria at about the same time. We picked them all up, and they came and stayed at our house for a week. So we had that translation, but we also had my friend Rachel, who came on a couple of day trips with us. So we didn't really have a lot of problem with language, and they wandered around the house and cooked things, and you know, they made themselves at home, and it was really quite easy actually.
But Sarah's response was, she's not really my mother, you're my mother, which was of course very different from Sarah's response when she was a teenager. But she never really developed any affinity for her mother. I think Debbie had more affinity for Sarah's mother than Sarah did, because Debbie realised what it must have cost her to relinquish a child. But one thing Sarah's mother did say to us was, I can see that she's had a very good life, and you have given her a very loving home, and she thanked us for looking after her daughter.
I like to ask this question, while you're bringing up children, have you ever regretted adopting Korean children?
No, we love the culture. It's just been hard. It was very hard at times.
There were times when they made choices that hurt themselves, and they simply would not listen to us. And those are times where the pain was pretty great. You know, I mean, we've never regretted adopting Korean children or anything like that. But there were times when it was hard to be their parents. But as we said, not when they were young. Up until adolescence, they were delightful. They were wonderful kids. But at adolescence, they really struggled. Now, we've talked to a lot of Australian parents, of course, and we know a lot of Australian parents, not all, but a lot of Australian parents have even worse problems with their kids than what we had. You know, Tim did say to me once, "Look, Dad, I may have these problems, but I haven't gotten onto drugs. So aren't you glad I never took drugs?" And I said, "Well, yes, Tim, we are glad that you weren't worse than you are. But you know, you could have been better." And another thing, there was a show on TV that once said that 30% of millennials, which our kids would be classed as that, have financial problems and have difficulties handling money. And they said to us, "See, Dad, look, 30% of our generation has problems. We're not unusual." And I said, "Yes, I know 30% of your generation has those problems, but why couldn't you be part of the 60% that doesn't?" But it is what it is. We believe God gave them to us. We don't always, there are times when we wondered why, but there are other times where we just were amazed and thankful.
Thank you very much for sharing your mind in the mind.
You're welcome.
Now, can you tell us about your grandchildren? Are you having a good time with them?
Well, little William was born while Sarah was with her husband, and he unfortunately got into drugs and got into trouble with the law, and that broke their marriage. She had to come back and live with us with her 1-year-old son, our grandson, so we have sort of raised him as another family. And he's had his challenges, but he's a lovely boy.
Smart.
He's very smart.
Now, how old is he?
He's just about to turn 8.
8. So you have been living with him for
7 years.
In Korea that might be a normal situation, but in Australia it's probably not quite so normal. So it has been exhausting at times, especially if Sarah goes to work and I have to pick him up from school and look after him until she gets home. It's been
Are you paid for that?
sometimes. Not really.
There are times when it's extra things that we demand a babysitter's payment because we feel she should contribute. But there are many times when it's just a grandparent's job.
I see.
Yeah. And then 6 months ago, Tim had a little girl called Isla May, and she is divine because Tim is half Japanese and half Mongolian, and Tara is half
Cambodian and half Spanish.
and half Spanish. She's a very exotic looking baby. She's absolutely beautiful. And she's a very happy baby. She just laughs and giggles all the time. But she doesn't sleep through the day, so she requires a lot of attention.
And what's your future plan with grandchildren or your children?
William.
Right up the top.
Or
We don't really have a future plan with our children. They'll make their own plans now.
your wish?
Well, we want Sarah to move out.
We want Sarah
Find
to
her own
start
place.
standing on her own 2 feet as a fully functioning adult. We'll be there as grandparents to help, but at the moment we're a little bit too close as parents. We would like her to have her own place. We'd like to be able to have William as a grandchild instead of being the disciplinarian parents, which you are when you're in your own house. As a lot of families say, the good thing about having grandchildren is that you can give them back. Well, unfortunately, with our living situation, we can't give him back. So we have to have a much higher role in the disciplining and training of him than normally a grandparent would. So normally a grandparent treats and spoils the grandchild.
Yeah.
That's the grandparent's job, and we've missed out on a little bit of that with William. With Isla, hopefully that there are just times where we can take her off her parents' hands, maybe for half a day, and enjoy her and treat her, and then give her back again. That would be some of our ideal.
I heard from Korean grandparents saying that differently from bringing their own child, when they see their grandchildren, they feel like their bone is melting. They like so much.
Yeah, it's funny. It's a funny feeling, actually. And
Do you
it's-
feel such feeling?
Well, it's very nice to see your children being parents.
And being grandparents, for you to be grandparents?
I don't know. It is nice to just enjoy them and then walk away. You know, it is nice.
Our difficulty is that in one sense we have been co-parenting William with Sarah,
Okay.
rather than being grandparents.
Yeah.
Can you imagine what will happen when William grown up and understand the whole historical situation? Like his mom is, from Korea and adopted.
We have talked to him about that. He doesn't really get it.
He doesn't.
No, he doesn't get it. She said she'd like to take him to Korea sometime.
So now Tim and Sarah, how do they evaluate or how do they think of Korea? Korea as their mother country, or do they?
Tim and Tara went back a couple of years, or same time as I went back, actually, same time as you.
2018.
And they loved it. The culture, the food, everything.
They like it?
Oh, they loved it.
Yes, I was a bit surprised. Tim felt really for him he felt he fitted in, even though he's covered in tattoos, and so I had a fear that most Koreans would see him as some form of yakuza or gangster. But Korean people treated him wonderfully and accepted him. They treated him nicely, and he just felt at home because everyone looked like him. Whereas for some of his upbringing, not for all of it, but for some of his upbringing, there were very few Asians around of any description. One of the schools he was in, out of 700 children, there was only about 5 non-Anglos. Now, that's changed a lot in Australia. It probably wouldn't happen hardly at all now, because in many, like where we live now, the situation is well and truly reversed. There's only about 5% Anglo-Australians, and the rest are Chinese Australians, Indian Australians, and all sorts of Sri Lankans,
Pakistanis.
and Thais, and all sorts of other Asian countries. But so there was obviously a time for Tim as a boy where he felt he looked different to everyone else, and so he loved Korea. Sarah, on the other hand, she was a girl and she was very pretty, and she just had to smile, and it didn't matter who she was with. She could wrap them around her little finger. She was very, very sociable, very good, and so Sarah didn't experience that sense of not belonging really in the same way Tim did.
In Australia?
In Australia, yes. I don't think he feels it so much now as an adult. I think he's gone through it, but he did love being in Korea.
He did.
And he will want to go back, take his daughter back there sometime. At some stage, I think because of his tattoos, he may come across some of that reaction that I was afraid of, but he didn't experience any of it in 2018. He's doing quite well in his current job. He is an executive in his company. He oversees the customer interfaces of an internet sales company that sells health and beauty products.
So Tim has a strong affection for his child?
Oh yes,
He has?
very strong. Yes.
Good.
And
Which is good.
Yeah, it's really been lovely to see that.
Okay.
Yes. Sarah has a strong affection for William too. The problem was when she had William, it was unexpected, and her marriage was breaking apart just as William was being born. She had a terrible pregnancy, so a lot of very bad things were going on in her life at that time, and that really took away from the pleasure of becoming a mother. But she does love him. She really adores him, and she says, she just doesn't know what would have happened. What would happen if he was taken away. He did.
Okay. Thank you very much for sharing your inner thoughts. I will edit it and make it short. Yeah.
From the wind and the rain, from the hurt and the pain. Yeah! Hey! Let's make it all for one, and all for love. Let the one you hold.
Don't worry. Good hand. Hold this. Good hand. Put it in. And then try to make your fingers.
How's your meal, Sarah? Is it delicious?
Yes.
What's the soup like? Do you like the soup?
Yes. You like to crab? Yes. Have you had some? Yes. Have you had some crab?